So I downloaded Splunk and I did a little test install offline just to make sure everything went to plan. I don't want to overplan because I want mistakes to be recorded so that we can troubleshoot together and kind of gain that experience. If I give you a purely idealistic world, it's not ideal. It's just not going to work for you. When you do this in real life, you're not going to have the troubleshooting skills. I downloaded this. You can see it's that BBB we had talked about in previous videos. We go to the download and we actually click the checksums and open them back up. You can see that BBB again. So this is the actual installer. You don't have to see me download it. You verified it using the MD5 checksum. From there, I'm going to go ahead and install like so. RPM-I, I'm going to zoom in so you can see it. RPM-I, Splunk, the files we had. I'm going to go back over to my installer script so we can talk about this. I talked about this installer script in a previous video. It's not the installer script. This isn't the installer system that you should be using. Again, I'm trying to provide you Legos, components, because when you get into customer A, B, and C, it's going to be a completely different experience on how they get software installed. But knowing they may use RPM, Debian, Windows installers, Docker, once you have the ideas down, it won't matter. The installation is probably finished by now, but you'll notice the next line of my script here, if you can read it, is to install it with RPM, but then verify that it's owned by Splunk. For those people who need a little refresher on file ownership, basically a direct, hold on here, I'll be doing two things at once here on camera. Here we are in the optional directory with the Splunk installed there. This is where anything bonus gets installed on top of your base operating system. I just want to make sure that it's owned by the Splunk user and Splunk group. This is chown recursive, so everything in there should now be owned as Splunk. Perfect. Oh, sorry, maybe not perfect. Now it's perfect. You can see the ownership. This is so that when this starts, if a hacker, a bad guy, or somebody legitimate is using Splunk, with the context of that user, it can only do the things that user is allowed to do. Theoretically, adding another line of security. Even though I'm running as root, that was necessary in order to run the RPM command. So we've installed the package now in the optional directory. It looks pretty good. Let's go down my script and see what else we can learn. Boot enable. So I'm just going to copy this. If we go to optional Splunk bin, we can see all the binary files, the actual executables. What the crux of what Splunk is right here. And there it is, the Splunk binary. So what I'm going to do today is set Splunk to boot at start. We go Splunk enable, and let me zoom in on that so it's a little easier to see. Splunk enable, boot start, user, Splunk, accept license. Answer yes to all the prompts automatically so we don't get bothered. I'm going to go ahead and do this, and it's going to go ahead and set up Splunk for us. We can see right here it worked. Oops, a little hard to read with the script kind of superimposed there. But as we can see, it's been set to run as boot, and the init script is installed for legacy backwards compatibility. So, with that said, I'm going to just explore Splunk for a second. This directory right here is everything. This opt Splunk etc. This directory right here contains all the configurations, particularly around the system configuration. In here, we're going to have all the default configurations that come with Splunk. Don't mess with anything in here. Splunk owns this folder. It's their folder. If you do need to override anything in the default folder, which has all kinds of configurations about health, indexes, everything you can imagine, we're going to learn all about these later. You can actually go in the local folder and type in your overrides here. As you can see in this case, it named my server Splunk. I'm going to name my server Splunk 1 just for fun, just to show that we can override and modify things in this local directory. Later on, we're going to use apps to do this, but for now, we're going to do everything in this system local folder. Definitely memorize this, make a flashcard right on the back of your hand. Now I'm going to pause for a second while I switch gears, and then we're going to talk about creating a user before Splunk boots. So I wanted to talk about this little snippet of bash scripting right here that sets up the user. You can kind of see what it's doing is it's actually going to echo out some content into this folder over here, this file over here in this folder, I should say. It's a little hard on the eyes, so I'm just going to kind of do it manually so you can see it. Again, in that system local folder we just talked about, I'm going to create userc.conf. It's just as a normal convention, we want to open up userseed.conf to let people know what file they're working with. It's also a great idea to let people know if this is being managed by an automation. Owned by Puppet, Ansible, Chef, whatever, to let them know edits will be destroyed. In this case, it's not true, but it's always a good idea to put that kind of documentation in there in your environment. Next thing we can see is that it's going to create a bit of a stanza. So what does this look like? So I'm going to pop this in where it says user info underscore. I'm going to create the username. So our default user is going to be named admin. Change that if you like. This is sort of your break glass user. This is not your user, like your daily driver, the account you're going to use while you work every day. We're going to federate to some sort of SSO service or an LDAP service at some point in the videos for that purpose. But for now, we're going to create this default user and this default password. Now, why am I sharing a password on screen? Why aren't we doing this a different way? The reality is, if we don't do it now, when Splunk starts, it's going to prompt us right from the web GUI, welcome to Splunk, would you like to set your admin username and password? We don't want a web GUI facing internally to possibly an insecure network, possibly to users, possibly just some curious person on your network who's one of 1,000 employees you might have in your company who goes, huh, that's weird, and it starts changing things without thinking. By seeding, user seed, this password ahead of time, only we in theory know. You may want to have this password pulled out of some sort of password management system. I know HashiCorp has one, Amazon has one. You could just randomize this. Depends on your environment. We're talking about those Legos to build your environment, so I'm just going to save there. So now we've created a user, so let's go see what's next. The next thing is, by default, Splunk is going to start on port 8000. You know what, let me stop. I'm going to start Splunk so you can see it happening. Give me just 2 minutes. I'm actually going to go, well, maybe I'll do it on camera. So I'm going to go opt Splunk, then Splunk start. And we saw it fly by there, but you can see it right here too. Splunk is going to start on HTTP, not HTTPS, and it's going to start on port 8000. What does that mean? It's insecure by default. So we need to override that behavior. In the case of this script over here, whoops, which I just clicked off of for some reason. Scroll back up. You can see I solved this by echoing out another configuration file, similar to we did user seed, called web.conf. So this is disappointing. So Splunk came up without security. Not ideal, especially if I'm going to be changing that admin password. Anybody can intercept that, and it's just bad form. Most web browsers these days are going to warn people. If it's a lab, hey, you're fine. But this is an insecure by default installation. I'm going to pause the video, shut Splunk down, and then I'm going to come back in and show you how to change that initial IP address, or that initial port that it runs on, and enable security. Right back. Okay, we're back. It didn't take as long as I thought it would to stop Splunk. I didn't want you to have to watch, but it was just opt Splunk, then Splunk stop, and it stopped Splunk. So we're going to go ahead and clear the screen so it's a little easier on the eyes and show you the current directory here. So we are in Splunk etc system local. We talked about that directory as being where you're allowed to do work. We're going to make this web.conf here again. So as usual, I'm just going to put web.conf up top. You know what? Let's pause. You don't want to see me copy and paste. All right. Didn't want you to sit there and watch me copy, paste, and typo. So under this web.conf file, we have this stanza called settings. And I like this convention of 2 spaces in to represent anything that I as a human manipulated. The computer will never put the spaces. So if you're dealing with a document that's thousands of lines long, this makes it real easy on the eyes to troubleshoot and identify. It's considered one of Splunk's best practices. Birch over there in their presentations talks about it at a Splunk conference every year. Saves everyone so much time in the long run. So first off, we're going to turn on WebSSL. This is going to tell Splunk to use its own certificates and get you that HTTPS you're looking for. The second thing we're going to do is tell it to be on a port that's not 8000. You could use 8000, but as a convention, we like secure ports to be on 443. But you notice I'm using 8443. That's because since I'm going to be running as Splunk, I'm not allowed to put anything under port, I think it's 1024. So anything that starts with a port like 443, 22, anything like that, if you're familiar with your networking, cannot be started with anybody but root. So we actually need to run Splunk as 8443, which is in the higher range, the insecure range, and then redirect it to a lower port number to the regular 443 later. We'll talk about that. If that didn't make sense to you, it will in just a few minutes. Right now I'm just saying I'm changing the port for convention and I'm turning on using internal certificates. Now when I start Splunk, we should see a different set of ports in use. So if I just started something on a new port and a new service, what do you think the next thing I need to do is? Firewall. So while we're waiting on that, let's just go ahead and Google real quick. I'm using CentOS, that's Firewall D. You might be on a Windows firewall. We're just going to say permit. You can see I've already looked up to 8,000 earlier. Here is our command to add a port. There's a permanent option below, but we're just going to do temporary here. So I might record this twice. So let's just paste this bad boy in. And now we're going to let 8443 in. So we're now allowing port 8443 in. IP adder show. So we'd actually see my current local IP address is right here. So we're going to go by IP address. And let's see. Did not rehearse this one. So let's see if it works. You'll notice I'm going to type in the local IP address that I'm using for my lab and 8443 on HTTPS. Drum roll. Hey, we're getting this. Proceed to this unsafe environment. Great. Now I'm going to type admin, change me 2022, which we talked about earlier. And I'm in. We are now officially in. At this point, you should probably go in settings, users, edit the user, and change that password. Very dangerous password, obviously. I literally broadcast it on YouTube. Do not use that in your environment. But we've installed Splunk. We've managed to give it a certificate, although it's not a valid one. It's a Splunk certificate, but at least you're not transmitting a clear text while you set up. We do have a little more work to do. Now I'm going to pause the video to give myself a personal break here. But we're going to come back and we're going to go ahead and change that off of 443 to the regular web where you would not have to key in that 8443. It's a little confusing for people, so let's get rid of that. Right back. So I had a sip of coffee, feeling good. Let's keep moving forward. Now, you might think you can just come in here and start poking around the interface and start saying, okay, well, what if I go in here to like server settings? And then maybe if I pop under here, there's a lot of cool stuff in here. Maybe there's an option for general settings. What's under here? Oh, look, management ports. I could just change the web port. This is just going to work, right? 8443, hit OK. Perfect. My server's totally going to be, oh, what happened? TC port 443 not available. We talked about this a little earlier, but Splunk is running as an unprivileged user, not running as root effectively. You can't run things below port 1024. That's by design. So we need to find a way to redirect the incoming communication from 8443 to 443. Let me go ahead and Google that for you. If we redirect firewall D and we search for this, and we actually have this really good article from Red Hat here, and I really recommend you read this guy. Oh my God. Clicked that like 3 times, didn't respond. So we're just going to scroll down here to the port forwarding. So we can see redirect 80 to 88. We want 8443 to, we want 443 to redirect 8443. I'm going to go ahead and clear that, pop that in. And there's some gibberish that I copied in my copy paste there. So this is our from 443 to 8443. Let's see if it worked. So we should be able to come back over here. And now by default, this should just be on 443, and it seems to be working. Notice the 443 is gone, and it's redirecting the communication. So we've actually convinced the firewall that's on Red Hat, on CentOS, to take all the communications coming in from 443, which is the default port for HTTPS, and tunnel it to 8443. This allows us to kind of follow all the best practices. Now, CentOS can be its own user, or Splunk can be its own user on CentOS. It's not opening privileged ports. We're just redirecting from a privileged port. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Comment below if you have questions. I'm happy to answer. And then there's a running config. We can save that. I'm not going to because this is a lab, but you would save that in whatever configuration management system, Ansible, Puppet, Chef you're using. So we're looking pretty good. We have an installation of Splunk. It's going to cry about IO wait because we're just running on some cheap virtual machines right now. But this is it. We have a functioning Splunk installation that's working. I'm going to come back down to our script now. We're going to see if we can think of anything else we might need to do as part of our installation. As we scroll down, we can actually replace the init file with some additional options. We'll talk about transparent huge paging, another one. It's very CentOS 7 specific, so it doesn't matter. I actually go through and remove some unnecessary apps. You can actually see there's an advertisement in here that I just don't like in production environments. CentOS Essentials, this is just garbage. This is you do not want this for your users. Feel free to like poke around if you'd like, but you're not going to really want to use it. Here I talk a little more about those ports. So, you know what? Now that I look at this, I don't think this is something we need to add just yet, but this is the guide if you need to actually collect data using Splunk Server, but you really shouldn't use Splunk Server for collecting data. You should be using Splunk Forwarder. So I think we've hit all the high points. Do hit me up with questions if I need to re-explain port redirection, if under seeding the user and changing the user account. I did point out you could change the user account right here under settings, users, and edits. So we just pop in the change me and whatever new password you have. I feel like I'm missing something critical here. Hit me up in the questions below. I'm happy to re-record this or directly tackle your issue. If you want to see this done on Windows, BSD, Azure, on another platform other than the one I just did, I'd love to hear it. Just let me know what you guys need, and I think we're good.